Linguistics Behind the Scenes.
What you always wanted to know about language and how to explore it.
With Christina Sanchez-Stockhammer.
And Dominic Piazza.
Welcome back, dear audience. I hope you're having a lovely day or evening or whatever time it may be when you're listening to this. Christina, how are you?
Hi, Dominic. Yeah, I'm fine. What about you?
Doing all right. I'm doing all right. Happy to be back as always. And Christina, I wanted to share something fun with you. Well, so I live very close to San Francisco. And in San Francisco, well, you've been there, right?
I have, yeah. It's a very, very beautiful town. I loved being there.
I think it has a very unique look. Certainly a very, very unique look. And there's a neighborhood in San Francisco called Japantown, much like you would have a Chinatown or a Koreatown. And in Japantown, every spring they have a cherry blossom festival.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, that's when the cherry blossoms bloom, and it's a time for like cultural performances, and lots of people gather to like buy things and go to restaurants, and it's a lot of fun. And I went recently to the Cherry Blossom Festival. It was my second time going. And the reason I mention this is because at Japantown, they have a lovely Japanese bookstore that I really love.
Ah. Yeah, I mean, makes sense, right? I mean, you speak some Japanese.
Yes. So they have, imported books, but they also have lots of like regular English language books that with kind of a Japanese focus. And one of my favorite sections at this bookstore is the phrasebook section.
Yeah, I can understand that. I like phrase books.
Yeah, they can be really fun, especially like some phrase books are specifically supposed to be funny. Others are more serious. And I've picked up a few of the phrase books at this store kind of for the novelty of it. Have you ever bought a phrase book?
Yeah, I have. I have actually used several phrase books in my life. For example, I once was a visiting professor in Poland, and that was just for a few weeks, and I didn't have the time to learn Polish properly, but I got a phrase book to learn at least a bit of the language.
Oh, yeah, that sounds very valuable because phrase books often they contain kind of phonetic pronunciations, telling you, kind of guiding you how to pronounce the words in your native tongue. And I would certainly need that for Polish because Polish spelling is notoriously difficult for outsiders to understand.
Yeah, I was also really glad about that because, it contained a transcript, so a rendering of the pronunciation that made it easy for Germans to just read it out as if it was German, but then it sounded like Polish.
Yeah, that sounds very, very valuable. I would desperately need that with Polish. It's an interesting case where the Latin alphabet has been applied to a Slavic language. Actually, it's really fascinating linguistically.
What about you, Dominic? How have you used the phrase books that you own?
Oh, well, yeah. So, kind of just reading the phrase book itself can be entertaining. Like it can just be fun to flip through and read the different phrases and some of the cultural information. Like it's just kind of a fun way to pass the time. I've also, when I was preparing to go to Germany, I was gifted a German phrase book, which I have here in my hand. And it's very nice. Usually phrase books are like very small, pocket sized, intended to be very portable because the intention is that you'll actually carry it with you when you're traveling and really use it as this kind of utility for communicating with people. But we live in the age of Google Translate and machine translation, which is a lot faster. So I didn't really carry phrase books with me. I bought them and read them, and maybe it's nice to study it ahead of time, but I used my phone for most of my translation needs.
Yeah, and that's one of the things, of course, that you can do when you're abroad. Or, sometimes you will also communicate in English with people who you meet abroad. But then I have to say I quite liked having that phrase book because it allowed me to learn at least a few useful expressions in Polish, because I thought, well, even if I'm just there for a very short amount of time, I want to show people there's some respect by trying to learn at least least a bit of the language. And so, I mean, it can be very helpful to learn things like hello, goodbye, oh, this is beautiful, things like that, where you show your appreciation. And that's a reason why I think it's quite nice to have a phrase book, to learn a few useful expressions that you can actually use without having to get out your phone.
Absolutely. And it's part of the fun. Part of the fun of traveling is learning some of the phrases and using them, because often local people will take it as a big compliment that you actually cared enough to learn their language, especially if it's a language which, isn't studied so much, right?
Yeah, totally. I have to say that, when I've been abroad in places where, Europeans are not necessarily expected to speak the language, people responded in a very excited way about me at least producing some words in their language, trying to make myself understood. And so I actually used Phrasebooks to help me with that. But one of the phrasebooks that helped me most to do so is a phrasebook in which, you actually understand all of the words, and in which you can produce all of the sentences in the phrasebook with just those words. And it comes from a series for which I actually produced a version myself. Namely the Spanish book. Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, first of all, you mentioned actually the effect of learning a language. Surely you must be talking about your travels in China, or maybe just your travels in Asia.
Yeah.
I know exactly what you're talking about, because, for example, I've studied some Japanese, and then I speak with some Japanese people. It's very basic. It's very simple, but it still gets them. I think they take it as a big compliment, because even though Japan is like this cultural behemoth, if you compare, if you compare the people around the world learning Japanese to how many people are learning English, for example, well, it pales in comparison. So even though it seems like this massive thing, the number of people actually learning the language is relatively small. So they take it as a big compliment if you actually took some time to learn it. And I love that, because one of the most rewarding things about learning languages is connecting with people. But that's really cool. So you actually used Phrasebooks when you were traveling across Asia, and then you wrote a phrasebook of your own.
Yeah, that was 20 years ago. So I was still writing my PhD thesis at the time, but I had been doing some work for Langenscheidt, a dictionary publisher, and then they asked me if I would be interested in writing a phrase book in a series that at the time was called Von Null auf 100, from 0 to 100.
Yeah, I think I've seen that. I've seen that tagline used on Phrasebooks here as well.
Yeah, and in that case, the idea is not just from like for a race car where you kind of accelerate to a speed of 100 miles per hour, kilometers per hour, etc.
Actually, 100 kilometers per hour, but we say 0 to 60 for 60 miles per hour. And I think 60 miles per hour is roughly 100 kilometers per hour.
That makes sense then. Yeah,
we would say that went from 0 to 60 real fast. It was like that escalated quickly.
That's interesting, because very often you would expect that in going in steps of 10, 100, 1,000 is the more natural thing to do. And so I quite like the title. So it was called Spanish from 0 to 100, if you translate it literally, because it's actually written in German. But then later the title was changed to Schnell mitreden auf Spanisch, which means, quickly joining the conversation in Spanish. And now in the meantime, this dictionary publisher, it came together with another dictionary publisher, namely Pons. So the trademark is still being conserved. But so recently I was approached if I would be interested in revising that book for a second edition. And I very happily did so, because it was a very special project that was and still is very dear to me. And so I'm excited to share that.
That's excellent. That's excellent. Well, 20 years. Yeah, I would say it's probably due for an update. That's a decent amount of time. A lot has changed since then. Language changes, as we've discussed in our podcast. Language changes, but it doesn't change that fast. However, technology changes very quickly, life changes and evolves very quickly, and we need new language and different words to go about our daily lives now than we did maybe 20 years ago. So what changed and what stayed the same?
Well, I mean, if you think about the technology at the time, that was even before the iPhone. So there were no smartphones around. You didn't have translation tools around you all the time. So carrying around a booklet with you seemed a very normal thing to do, the best thing to do if you wanted to get around in another language. And you're right. I mean, the language as such, it's very basic. It's the idea is that you learn 100 words, and with those 100 words, you're able to say over 500 sentences, which I think is very gratifying because it's just a small amount of learning by heart that goes into it, and then you can say all those sentences. And of course, I mean, since you only have 100 words, it's going to be pretty basic words. So that didn't change a lot. But you're right. I mean, technology changed in the meantime.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, slang changes really fast, but slang isn't the type of thing you would put in a phrase book. Maybe you'd put in a little bit of it in the social section, but otherwise, I would think you try to include kind of maybe basic high frequency language, not the type of stuff that changes.
Well, I suppose I would like to read some slang in a more traditional phrase book that is also longer. But this book that I wrote and of which I produced a second revised edition now, that's very, very short. It's just a bit over, I think, 120 or so pages. And for that reason, it doesn't include any slang. I mean, if you just have 100 words to express all the different things you want to say as a tourist, then slang words don't really make the race into it. But I mean, regarding the technology, of course, technology words are not part of it either. But what we had in addition to those 500 sentences that you can produce with those 100 words is additional sentences for which you can use some pictures and additional vocabulary that are included. And at the time, we had a sentence that was like, is there a telephone in my room? And of course, these days, you don't really need a telephone in your hotel room anymore. No.
But there probably will be one. But no, you don't.
There might be.
But you don't really need it. No, you're right. Yeah.
Nah, but you might rather be interested in knowing how you can access the Wi-Fi. And
certainly.
And so that's what we included in the revised edition, because of course we wanted to update it. I mean, just like the culture notes, I suppose that your phrase books that you have for German, for example, or for Japanese, they also include some cultural suggestions so that you know what is typical. That phrase book, that also includes some of these for Spanish.
Definitely,
mainly for mainland Spain, because that is where, let's say, Germans traditionally go. So the book is directed at a German market, but I think the idea as such is a wonderful concept. And that's the reason why the culture tips are about Spain and less about Latin America.
Yes, Germans love to vacation in Spain. Kind of an open secret, right? Especially in the Spanish islands. It's very, very pleasant, especially in the winter. Yes. Excellent. Yeah, definitely. The cultural knowledge is really, well, sometimes the cultural knowledge is necessary to explain some of the grammar. So like in this German phrase book that I have here, it's not a language learning book. So they're not going to overwhelm you, but they're going to at least teach you the grammar that you need to know to understand the phrases. So for example, that German has informal and formal language, right? Because it needs to explain why are there two versions of some of these sentences, whether you're saying Sie or whether you're saying du, and in what context would you use each one. So they have to explain that because you need that cultural knowledge to understand that part of German grammar.
Totally. I totally agree, because otherwise it's more difficult to kind of get along. Even though I would say that people will be very forgiving with someone who obviously doesn't speak the language well.
Totally.
So if the person just used do or just used see, I think that would be okay. But I mean, grammar is also important for the phrase book that I wrote. What I really wanted to make sure is that if someone starts in the beginning of the phrase book and then continues reading it, then you will learn the grammar step by step as you need it. And every time something new is required from you when you string those words together, well, you first get the example and then you get a little grammar box that explains to you what you're doing. Like, for example, that the plural is formed by adding an S in the end.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're right about it being more forgiving. My first week in Germany, I think I approached a clerk at a store and I said, sprichst du English? And it wasn't until much later that I realized it might have been rude of me. I mean, I don't think so. I don't think the person was offended at all. But I think technically I should have used the formal language when speaking with an employee at a store who is a stranger to me. But usually people are pretty forgiving when they know you're foreign.
Yeah, and that's the thing that obviously, I mean, particularly when you're standing there with a phrase book in your hand, trying to say a few words, I think it's the effort that counts. I mean, we're all human and it shows that you care enough about the other culture to try and remember things. And I think that's what counts. Well, the nice thing is that I can really praise this book because, I mean, it's strange if you praise your own work, but in this case, I can say that the wonderful idea, the concept for this book wasn't my own. So I was part of a group of different authors who wrote books for different languages, and Christiane Bohner directed the whole series. And so we all contributed our own ideas, and then some of the ideas that I contributed, I think later made it into the other books as well. But as such, it's really a kind of joint project too. And now, of course, in the revised version, Ursula Martini from Pons, was also very supportive in making the revisions and improving the book further. So, that's why I'm so happy to say that I really enjoy this book so much.
Excellent. And the book is sold pretty well, right? That's why you're making a second edition.
Well, I hope so. Or it seems like that. I couldn't really tell you any details. But apparently. I mean, and isn't that nice? Because as we said before, you wouldn't expect that, would that you? I mean, at the time at which you can just use Google Translate still. Yeah. This would seem like an out-of-time project, but I think that it's precisely this very special character that you understand everything that you want to say in the context of this book, all the sentences in there that allow you to express a lot of things, to book a hotel room, to say that you like the food, to ask where you can go and visit things in the place where you are, to have small talk, to go to a doctor. I mean, all of that, you will understand everything because everything contained in that book can just be expressed with those 100 words. And I think this is really something I haven't seen anywhere else. And I think that's a nice, linguistic hack basically here, that you just try to use as few words as possible to express all the things that are relevant to, or not all the things, but many of the things that are relevant when you're traveling.
Yes, absolutely. Well, yeah, I get what you mean in that, you might think in the modern day, aren't these phrase books a bit antiquated? But clearly that's not the case because stores still carry them. And if they still carry them, that must mean that there's demand. I in the age of smartphones and machine translation, I think it's still nice to have a phrase book for a few reasons. First of all, it's curated. It's like a curated, handcrafted selection of phrases you might need. I think it's useful as a resource to kind of study ahead of time, to learn the phrases that you might need ahead of time. Because, I can't actually imagine actively having a conversation with someone and trying to actively flip through pages to find the phrases I need. That kind of sounds like a nightmare. It would be much faster to use my phone. But, I agree. But to study it ahead of time, I think it's a very useful resource, and I think it's fun. It's part of the fun. It's part of the fun of traveling. Part of the fun of traveling is preparing and getting ready, and so it's fun to grab a phrase book and try to study up what you can as you get ready for your trip.
Yeah, even though I have to admit that I think I very often just do that when I'm on the plane. So when I arrive, often I don't have time beforehand. So that's why I think it's helpful to just having to learn so few words here. But you're right. I mean, I don't imagine myself kind of trying to look for the right word in the heat of a conversation either. But of course, if you just kind of study a bit beforehand with this specific kind of book, it's possible to know exactly what you want to say. And if you can't produce it 100% perfectly, you know where you need to go and you can find it very quickly. That's the nice thing. So one could even do that there. But otherwise, I agree. It's something you would read beforehand. And I mean, I suppose in a certain way you wouldn't expect that it's fun to read a phrase book, but I actually enjoyed reading that phrase book. And
it certainly can be.
Yeah, it can be. I mean, it can be, for example, I mean, it apparently is fun for you, but I hadn't thought of it being fun before. But when I looked at the content and when I just read it through from the beginning to the end for the revision, I noticed how much I enjoyed the little narratives that we had included, because it's whole little conversations, right?
Yeah, that's exactly it, is that the people crafting the book, they're trying to prepare you for everyday situations which might arise. And so it's just a little bit funny. It's kind of amusing and entertaining to kind of read these scenarios that they came up with. Some of them might be very realistic. Others might seem a bit less realistic or a bit less common. And it's just, it's fun. It's fun to imagine these different scenarios playing out.
Yeah, I mean, like, for example, I think I wrote something like, when you arrive at your hotel, you might be hungry. Yeah. Then you could ask, where can I eat something? I mean, the equivalent in Spanish, but basically just in very simple words, you know? And then you kind of see what kind of answers you could get, or for the small talk, you get suggestions what people might reply. And I thought it was pretty nice, pretty humorous. And there's even a section on flirting, which I quite liked. Yeah.
Always. There's usually always a romance section, which is one of the funniest parts to me. But just being able to say things isn't very useful if you can't understand what people reply to you. So that's why the phrase books often contain very likely probable replies, so that you can actually understand what someone says to you.
Yeah, or possibly, I mean, if you're not sure, I mean, particularly when the pronunciation makes it difficult for you to understand, you could always show that to a person speaking the other language, and then they might pick out one of those different answers and possibly point at it, and then you could read the translation. I mean, for the phrase book that I wrote, it wouldn't be such a big deal, because you would, in theory, understand at least the answers with the 100 words anyway. But there's always a translation there, and I think that's helpful. So kind of also being prepared for what you might get as a reply, because it's not enough to ask. You also need to understand what people reply. But then, of course, in the end, ultimately, you could also use a translation device, possibly, if it's difficult and if it counts, if it's relevant, and if it's not something that is obvious in the situation, like pointing to the left, pointing to the right, so that you know where you need to go to find a specific site, for example.
Yeah. I mean, phrasebooks in general, it's a very interesting resource in that, it's not a language learning textbook. It's designed, and it's really designed for people who know nothing at all about the target language, because I think for the most part, it's for people who are traveling. Even if you're moving abroad, you would probably want to pick up a phrasebook, but it's designed for people who know just about zero about the language. And so it's very different from a traditional language textbook, and it has a very different goal than a traditional language textbook. Not to mention they're usually very small, so you have to be concise, and it has to be compact and short. Also, I think it's relatively common that these phrase books might contain a small dictionary in the back.
Yeah, that one also does. But I mean, the idea is that you can basically do most things anyway with those 100 words. So it's not so relevant. But for other phrase books, I have to say that's a very important part of it. That helped me a lot when I traveled around Poland, for example, to just find out about the meaning of specific words. But what you just mentioned, namely that the phrase books are also addressed at people who are not very experienced in language learning, that's also something that we try to keep in mind with that particular phrase book. So we also try to include some strategies. For example, if you are a successful language learner, you might frequently just point at things and ask, what's this, And so we explicitly included that relatively towards the beginning in order to suggest to the users that this is how they could enlarge their vocabulary. And if you think about the fact that this is a little printed book, well, what you can do as a user is you can always write down additional words in that little book and make it your own and personalize it with the additional words that you learn. So that once you learned a pattern like I want, and then, well, something has to come there. Yeah. Well, you just note down the words that you want to use there. Like I want, I don't know, different types of food, for example.
Yes, exactly. So it's not, the goal isn't to teach you the language, but there is a little bit of learning involved. At least if you're learning the basic phrases, then you can also learn how to make your own very simple sentences. So you want to give some agency and autonomy to the user of the phrase book, which is really cool and much more rewarding to be able to communicate independently of a book. Also, it's quite common for these phrase books to have phonetic transcriptions of the language, where they've written down, they look very funny. They've written down how to pronounce the various phrases because, the pronunciation of certain letters and things like that can be different across various languages. So they have phonetic transcriptions, and these are highly specific to the language the book is written in, right? So your book is for German people learning Spanish, so it contains phonetic transcriptions that comply with German pronunciation rules. If it was English to Spanish, it would be totally different.
Yeah, totally.
We mentioned a moment ago that these phrase books usually contain a dictionary, but the dictionary is not expansive by any means. It's just very high frequency words that you would need while traveling. And Christina, on the subject of word frequency, well, this is something that as a linguist, you often study. How did your background as a linguist inform your creation of this book?
I suppose it did so in many different ways because, of course, I'm very interested also in language learning and making that easier for people. I mean, not just the learning of the English language, but kind of language in general. And so, frequency is a very important factor. And so I knew that if I wanted to select 100 words that are relevant to learners, then these would most likely be particularly common words. But then, of course, I also knew that it might be a good idea to try and find some grammatical words or some other words that you can use for different purposes. Words like tiempo, which means time, but also weather, which is pretty convenient in Spanish.
Same in
because
French.
Of course, because it means that you presumably want to know what time it is. You presumably want to talk about the weather when you do small talk. So I also tried to find such multi-purpose words as well. And of course, I tried to think about what words are relevant if you just want to point at things. So words like those or this, or that. Yeah. So, but of course, trying to keep all these to a limit. So, for example, when it comes to the inflected forms, like the form of like the first person, second person, etc. So trying to reduce that to a minimum to try and see, okay, what is it that I need? And so I thought, okay, the most important thing would be to say, I want this. Yeah. So kind of thinking about me as the first person, trying to to get things or to be able to convey things that affect me as a person. And then also thinking of the different contexts, of course. I mean, based on my experience as a person who enjoys traveling a lot, but also, of course, based on what I received as a briefing and from the director of this whole series.
Excellent. Well, I also enjoy traveling a lot when I can. So I would love to have one of these books for Spanish. Maybe you can make an English to Spanish version. Maybe that can be the next thing you do.
That would be a lovely idea. Yeah, why not? Let's see. I mean, I think it's a very good concept. I mean, because it's still, even these days, when you have so many tools for automatic translation, it's still very, very helpful if you want to convey a message from one human to another human and without putting too much effort into it. So I think that's really good. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely, and it's been handcrafted, it's been human curated, because sometimes machine translation is notorious that sometimes it can misinterpret you, or it can interpret you literally, and the output it produces in some situations might not be exactly what you wanted to communicate. I don't want to overstate that, because I think these days it's very strong, but it can still kind of make mistakes or misunderstand, and then you might not be saying what you want to say. But with this phrase book, everything's been human verified.
Well, but still, I mean, humans misunderstand each other a lot
That's
too.
True.
So,
That's
I
true.
mean, we can't guarantee that if you use a phrasebook, people won't misunderstand you. Because, of course, some of the sentences will work differently in different contexts. And that is why we have these little stories around it, so that you see, okay, this is how you would use the sentence in this particular context, for example. But as such, it's human curated. And I mean, kind of the process that went into the selection of the words, that was also a bit of trial and error, trying to see what do I want to express, and then kind of making it match those 100 words that I had available. And interestingly, I mean, from a linguistic perspective, this means that it will be different words in the different languages, because words like I just said, like tiempo, which can mean time and weather, well, there's different ones in the different languages that you will use. And accordingly, another language might have the opportunity to express something with these words that I couldn't express in Spanish. And so that's also quite interesting too, that you can't do exactly the same thing for all languages, because it will depend on the specific structure of the vocabulary.
Yes, definitely, and region. I mentioned to you my German phrase book. If you pick up a German phrase book, you probably want to go to Germany, but you might also be traveling to Austria or Switzerland, and so here and there it contains some Austrian and Swiss German. But you have to hope that the phrase book is teaching you kind of a neutral variety of the language that could be understood more or less universally. You mentioned that your phrasebook focuses on European Spanish, but even within Spain, there are great differences, linguistic differences. So you have to hope that this neutral language will be generally understood, because you don't know specifically where the person is traveling to.
Yeah, but I have to say, it's really such a basic level that you can achieve with just 100 words. I would assume that should basically work everywhere. And of course, we tried to make it work. We tried to really produce idiomatic language that is correct Spanish as you would use it in that particular situation. Yeah. But in some contexts, I mean, there might be some way of expressing an idea that might be even more common, but then we might have picked the second most common one or so that is still grammatical, just because it was possible to express that within the range of words that was available.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Well, it has to be short, like you mentioned. It has to be brief and concise. And I'm reminded of a famous, I believe, Mark Twain quote. There are many Mark Twain witticisms. He said, "I didn't have time to write a short letter, so I wrote a long one instead.
Yeah.
And the idea is that it's much harder to edit down something than it is to just throw whatever onto the page. So you have to be very judicious and thoughtful about what it is you include because you have limited space.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's a very nice little game that you can play. I mean, it's a game that I really played when I wrote this book, but it's a game that everyone can play. I mean, you can think of a really complex idea that you want to transmit, and then you try and express it in the simplest words possible. And that's pretty much fun. And in the end, you will notice that sometimes it's possible to do that, and the result will still work. For example, instead of saying, did I make a mistake when I just said that? You could also ask, was this not right? You know?
Yeah.
And that's what we would have suggested in the phrase book.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, it is kind of fun to think, what is the simplest way I could phrase the idea that I want to say? It is fun. And I think actually the exercise, it can improve your own language skills in your own native language.
Yeah, sometimes it's helpful to try and make yourself understood in the simplest possible way. But of course, you don't want to lose precision. I mean, usually, as a linguist, as an advanced learner, as a teacher of students at a very advanced level of English, I work towards the other end. You know, I try to teach even the tiny little details of language that are fascinating. And I think that's why I enjoyed it so much to deal with this again and to try and express everything in the simplest possible way. And I mean, kind of managing that can give you a great sense of satisfaction if you're able to just use very few words and still express a lot using them.
Totally. Because often with a phrase book, it's possible with a phrase book, it's possible the person doesn't want to actually learn the language. They just want to learn what they need for their trip or whatever purpose it is that they're learning the language. They don't intend to fully study the language, so you don't want to overwhelm them.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, the principle of economy is something that I often talk about in my lectures. It's this idea that when we use language, we try to be efficient, and so it's the same there. I mean, learners have different reasons why they're learning a language, and when you're on holiday, well, a certain level will be enough. You don't want to be perfect. You just want to be able to communicate with others, and well, that's what phrasebooks can be really good for. But of course, I mean, I'm a huge fan of going beyond that level. So possibly, I mean, in some cases, and when you have enough time available, well, a seed might be sown in you when you start reading a phrasebook, and then you might continue to learn a language properly, in more detail and become an expert.
It is kind of like a springboard or a launch pad for actually studying the language in depth. Absolutely. It's a great place to start because it's designed as an absolute beginning. So you're totally right.
Yeah, springboard. That's a really nice idea because I mean, languages are so big. I mean, there's so much vocabulary, so many interesting grammatical structures that you can learn. And so a starting point is always a good thing, but there's so many things to explore. And of course, that's what we try to do as linguists, exploring language.
Yeah, I can imagine this project was particularly interesting for you because I don't think you need a PhD in linguistics to write a phrase book. But if you have one, then I would certainly think it really frames the way that you put it all together.
Yeah, it does. And at the same time, it's just so much fun to reduce it to the minimum and to kind of let language magic work.
Yes, very fun. Muy divertido.
Yeah, indeed.
Well, muchas gracias, Christina. I think you've inspired me to revisit some of my phrase books that I already have and maybe even go to the bookstore and see what else they have on offer. Yeah, this was fun.
Yeah, that's a great idea. And why don't you do the same thing, everyone out there? Take a look at the phrase books you already have or get a new one. So stay curious, have fun with language.
And join us next time on Linguistics Behind the Scenes.